right, 10-3 is in the books for Michigan football following a 41-15 loss in the Peach Bowl to Florida, a third tussle against the Gators in 3 seasons. This one did not go Michigan's way. We got Steve Dace on the line from Michigan Podcast. Steve, how are you tonight?
I'm okay, Mark. How you doing, man? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. And 2019, what does it hold in store for the Maize and Blue? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. But first of all, I would like to know how you, as a Michigan fan and supporter of this program, as ardent as they come, how you take that game against Florida knowing, hey, I want to win a postseason game. I want to be ranked as high as possible and all those other things that come with winning a bowl game versus our offense and defense were largely depleted, especially the defensive side of the ball. So how seriously can I take this result versus what can I expect out of my team when most of the best players aren't here?
Well, I went back and looked at the 24/7 composite recruiting rankings in the last 3 recruiting classes. And because Colin Cowherd said this past week that Jim Harbaugh can't be expected to compete for championships given his recruiting footprint. So I went back and looked at the last 3 recruiting classes. Michigan assigned 41 4- and 5-star players, according to the 247 composite. Florida signed 31 and had a coaching change. Okay, so even with Rashawn Gary is going to go down as one of the most overrated players in Michigan history. I mean, he had 9.5 sacks in 3 years. He's a good player, but nowhere near what you would expect from the consensus #1 overall recruit in the country. Devin Bush was a major loss, no doubt. Florida, though, Karan Higdon had a nice season and is a good player. But, Florida's rush defense was 76th in the country. And against 2 FCS opponents, they had given up 188 yards rushing a game. So you should need Karan Higdon to run the ball against that defense. I think what I'm the most disappointed by is 15 practices, essentially an entire spring practice leading up to the bowl game. The same issues offensively, the same lack of urgency. There was one exchange of downs late in the game, Mark, where we were trying to score when it was still relatively competitive. We took 4 minutes off the clock, not in the drive, but running the goal to go plays. And if you watched that Rose Bowl last night, it was pretty obvious Chris Peterson graduated from the Jim Harbaugh school of lack of not urgency and clock management. It was like he didn't want another possession and wanted to have it come down to an onside kick. Jim Harbaugh did the same thing we saw against Ohio State. And that's what's the most disappointing to me is, everybody that started in that Peach Bowl, all those guys are back this fall. And so this was a chance to show, and to his credit, the offense did evolve this year. They did add RPO. They did add zone read. I don't think Jim's scheme is antiquated. I don't agree with that criticism. I think his game day coaching is extremely conservative. And I think Michigan showed that they've got to evolve from a brawler, to use a Rocky Balboa reference. They got to evolve from a brawler to a boxer, Mark. And here's what I mean by that. When we have out-recruited 80% of college football under Jim Harbaugh, okay? Now, I thought Barton Simmons of 247 Sports had a good observation. He said, the way Michigan coaches on game day, they need to recruit like Alabama and Georgia, meaning we can just outman you at every position. So we've recruited very well, but we don't. That's where the recruiting footprint comes into play, is you're not going to be able to just outman the next 20% of opponents. And so what happens is we get in the ring against the teams that recruit at our level, like a Florida, maybe a little below, or an Ohio State at or above, a little above our level. And so we throw that punch that knocks the other 80% of the teams on our schedule on their rear ends, and that other team hits back. And suddenly we go from Mike Tyson's punch out to Glass Joe. We don't have a counter. There's no and we're like, oh, what do we do? So let's just keep doing the same thing we did before. We've got all those receivers. We ran the ball between the tackles with a freshman running back against Florida more than we targeted those guys down the field. And I don't have a good reason, an answer for why that is, because there aren't any good reasons and answers. It's dumb. All right. So what this year was like for Michigan is very similar to Ohio State's 2015. Now, this isn't as talented as that 2015 Ohio State team, but all year until the very end, Urban Meyer seemed to fight his quarterback, Cardale Jones. And he should have either evolved his offense or gone with JT Barrett all year long. Okay. And what I was curious to see when Urban came back from suspension, when he got really an air raid OC and the numbers Haskins was putting up, I was curious to see if Urban was going to try and push back with his favored powered spread like he did Cardale Jones, or if he was willing to let Dwayne Haskins sling it all over the field to those receivers. And this year you saw he got out of the way and that offense became really indefensible. And what we saw this year is Jim wasn't really – he evolved the scheme, but on game day he wasn't truly willing to alter his approach to take advantage of the skill set of his quarterback and all those 4- and 5-star receivers that he's recruited. And, this incoming class, he's got 3 pure slots coming in. We've never had players like that at Michigan, at least since, guys like Desmond Howard before we knew what a slot receiver was. And so you don't recruit 3 of those guys unless you plan on using them, right? But what happens is, we practice this stuff during the week. Even the players are saying this. We practice this stuff during the week, then we get in there in game days, get hit in the mouth, and the coaches basically panic and go back to the stuff they're used to utilizing. So I think that's the big question. Michigan now is in this no man's land. They've got the 7th best record in college football the last 4 years. That's really good. They're 1-9 against AP top 10 teams. That's really bad. So they're stuck on good and they're trying to be great. And I think to get to great, Jim Harbaugh is going to have to be willing to be more merciless and less dogmatic about what wins on game days, similar to what we saw Urban Meyer willing to do with Ryan Day. And if you look with Ryan Day taking over as the coach, going and getting Oklahoma State's offensive coordinator, they're all in on the air raid. You're not bringing Oklahoma State's offensive coordinator in to go back to a power spread. So whether it's Dwayne Haskins or Tate Martell or Justin Fields, whoever the quarterback is next year, they're going to be air raiding it out. And so I think what Michigan needs to show, and the same thing is on defense. We get against teams that we can out recruit and we play them man-to-man. They can't beat us in man-to-man matchups, and we dominate them. We get to that next 10 to 20% of college football that recruits at or above our level, and there's too much man coverage and we can't hold up and they get too many big plays. So again, on both sides of the ball, Mark, Michigan's going to have to evolve the way that it coaches on game day. It's going to have to get more scheme versatility.